Okay, we're going to paint one of these. These are in my garden. I bought it recently and it's by the little pond, and it's viola, some type of viola. It's like a ground cover, and you'll hear Mario in the background. I'm sitting downstairs, so he keeps on saying a lot of things that I don't normally understand, but you'll hear him call, and it sounds like he's saying Mia or Ya. Anyway, so this is also a little leaf that I want to paint. I made some green tea. For me, this is my sketchbook studies that I do on the weekend, and this is the Sminky watercolor set that I keep downstairs. I never clean the set. I always keep all of my colors there, and then I just mix some colors, except if it's very dirty or muddy, and that's the color chart. It's not a full set. You can still add more colors there. And this is the brush. The brushes, I normally just drop the brushes in there, which is not a good idea. I'm supposed to put the plastic covers on them, because you'll see that one of the brushes actually bent a little bit, that I will have to fix at a later stage while I'm painting. So the travel brushes are very nice because they have a lid, which is very convenient for when you travel. But I'm in the garden. I'm not not traveling. I worked in the garden a little bit because I haven't been able to. This is a little water holder for watercolors. You can travel with it. It's very nice. It's plastic and it folds up. It collapses a little bit, and you can keep it in a bag, and then you can just fill it up with some water and fold it away when it's done. And that is quite a nice holder for traveling as well. Some of my brushes, and I'm going to sketch. I'm just looking for a pencil. So I'm just going to sketch this out very quickly. These are also some of my travel brushes that I have downstairs. Yeah, I've painted with them before. If you've seen me paint in the garden, these are the ones, and they have a little lid like that, and they keep the little hairs all together. Another one, nice sizes. I bought them on Etsy, and I think I've linked them in some of the other paintings that I painted. So this is what happened to that one brush of mine. This is what I did, and I had it in a bag, and it's not a good idea, but it folded a little bit. But it will, I will be able to fix it if I wet it a little bit, and I'll be able to paint with that. I'll use a bit of soap just to keep it in check, all the little hairs. But yeah, preferably keep your little plastic covers for your brushes. So I'm going to put this little flower down there. This is my Still Man and Bone watercolor book. I've painted a watermelon melon recently. Watermelon recently. And I used this, but for the paper it was the best to use, because obviously the paper is a little bit, you can't scrub on the paper, and I like to scrub on my paper to remove some of the pigment. But anyway, I'm just going to draw it out like this. Now my angle is slightly different to your angle that you will be able to see. I'm looking at it from the side, and you're looking at it from the top, because the camera is straight above me, or above the painting. So my angle will look slightly different, but it doesn't matter. You'll see what I'll do, and I'm just sharing what you can paint on weekends. Just find a flower in your garden, just sit and relax and paint, because life sometimes gets a bit hectic. And this is a fun way just to get your paint out and sit and paint, especially if you can do it in a garden or beautiful setting where where your favorite part in your house is. That's where I normally sit. I have a tiny table which is about 50 centimeters long and about 40 centimeters wide. So it is, no, I would say it's more the other way around. It's more 50 centimeters wide and 40 centimeters long. And it's just big enough for my watercolor book and all of my, you can see it's a bit cramped on here, but it's, my teas there, everything. So that's all you need for watercolors. And I always pack this away, I don't leave it out. So it's not the best to do, but if you paint in a garden, that's what you have to do, especially me here. So you're lucky if you don't have to do that. Let me just fix this. I want to zoom it in a bit more. And that is the tiny little leaf that I painted as well. So hopefully you'll be able to see the color mixes. I'll see if, because I can't really see how the camera is looking, it's above my head. If I notice you can't see the colors, I will maybe just fix it next time so that we can share all of the colors as well. lots of little sunbirds and sugarbirds in the garden at the moment. And Tyson is playing on the floor here next to me. I had a babysitter for a few minutes, but now he's here by me. He woke up and yes. So this is a diluted sepia or Payne's grey mix with just a tiny touch of the ultramarine in. Now ultramarine just gives it a little bit of a different, I would say, interest because it's just to change it up a bit. So it's not just black, and it's literally just a drop that I picked up and I added in there. So you can use whichever color. You can even use a tiny diluted drop of purple. But I do want to keep the white petals as light as possible. Obviously, I left the pencil markings as dark as I can because it is, I'm recording it and I want you to see it on the white paper. So we'll have to see. I'm not going to rub it out. It is my sketchbook. And what I'm going to do now is move it slightly. So change the angle a bit, but I'm just going to drop in some of the purple mix here that I have on my palette. I mixed, you can use any sort of, I would say, permanent rose with some ultramarine. It creates a beautiful purple mix. There's a bit more of a red purple mix, so I'm going to just play around and use it on my palette. What I'm doing here is the paper is a bit wet, so it will flow over those little sections, but it's not too wet. And then I just wet my brush, and I have tissue paper. You can't see it; it's right underneath the pad here. So I just quickly my sketchbook, and I just quickly dab it on there all the time, and then that's my water at the top there, and then the tissue paper is right here at the bottom. Unfortunately, it's a bit cramped, so I can't show you everything. But for this part, and then I'm just going to go in with a more of a red purple mix here, and I'm just going to wet it and soften those little markings. I just had to run after Tyson. He is eating absolutely everything on the floor. So what I do here is I want to create a darker little section in here that I can see on the fold of the flower there. So I just pick up some of that grey mix and then I just wet it with some water. On this section, I want to make sure that that is that darker section there. Can you see that? So I'm going to paint that in first, like that. And then I'm going to rinse my brush, wipe it on some tissue paper, and then I'm going to soften those little hard lines that I created. But only on this side, not on the other side. There he takes my shoe. Alright, as long as you play here so I can see you. And I'm going to leave that to dry. Now that little section's got a little bit more of a, I would say, a pinkish color in there, so it's not a blue purple, it's more pink purple. And I have some ruby red, which is a PV19 that I use for that mix. I dropped in the purple mix and now I'm going to just soften it with my brush. I'm going to leave that to stain that section of the paper and then I will go back later and just lift it out. So this is a very small brush, this is a number 0 brush. And I want to create those little lines that I can see on that tiny little viola. I'm just pulling it towards the edge of the petal. And the mix is very thick on my brush. There's not a lot of water on because I do not want a lot of water. I don't want it to flood the paper. I also don't want too thick lines. So I'm just using my fine tip of my brush with quite a thick mix of the paint on my brush there. And this section too, and then I'm going to soften it at a later stage. And I just darken a few if I think they need to be darkened. Now washed my brush, rinsed it in some clean water, and now I'm just going to move it towards the center of the flower. And then these I'm just going to pull out to the tip of the petal. Because the petal is white, I want to take some of that pigment to the edge so you can see it on the paper. And now I'm going to use some of my yellow green mix for the stem. I drew one line because I'm going to draw quite a thick line. So I don't need to draw a double line. And then I'm going to wet my brush and I'm just putting some of that pigment away. I'm wetting on this side only, not that side. Only the one side because I do not want to soften the other side. Just like that. And then I'm going to drop in some of the yellow. Create that yellow stem that I can see there on my paper. On this side, the same thing. I'm just putting it towards the center of that leaf there. And then I soften it again with some clean water. Now I'm going to wet this whole leaf. I don't want too much water on my brush because it is a sketchbook and it will buckle. It's not paper that is a block of paper, and I didn't stretch it at all. I'm just very careful not to wet it too much. So this is the yellow green mix. I can just move it in the view. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's quite zoomed in. And then I just pick some up and I just drop it in there. So this is wet on wet. But too wet, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to manipulate that with my brush the whole time until I'm happy with it. I'm going to make sure that I don't create any watercolor blooms there or hard lines. I'm just pulling it out towards the outside of this petal there, leaf, not petal. I'm going to wait for that to dry now. So I want to create that dark section there that you can see on the center of that flower there. So I'm picking up some of that sepia or Payne's grey mix, and there's a touch of blue in there. I want to go out on this section, so I want to just paint that part as well. I'm also going to put some in on this section. And I don't have too much water on my brush, and I also don't have too much pigment on my brush because I can always go back later and darken it. So I want to just have enough on there. Now watercolor always dry much lighter, like I said before, so you might have to go back later and add in more color. And for this, I'm just going to soften with my brush. And these flowers are very, very delicate, so I want to keep it as delicate as possible. And I also try to draw it the same size as the little flower that I can see. Obviously, the angle is a little bit different, but it doesn't matter as long as we get most of the color in and the shape of these little petals sort of folded. It's not like a normal pansy of yellow that you can see. Just dropped in a bit of yellow on that center part there. Some more of the blue mix, blue purple mix. And then on the section 2, I want a bit more of a red purple mix. And yeah, I'm going to show you how dark I'm going to go. So that is the more of the red purple mix, and then the blue purple mix is on the left hand side. If I feel I need some more of a warmer purple, I will just use some of the warmer purple, and if I need some of the cooler purple, I just use some of the cooler purple with a bit more blue mixed into that. And I always have two separate bundles of paint next to each other, where the one is a little bit more warmer or the one is a bit more cooler. And now I'm going to go in with some more of that pink. So I want to warm it up a little bit more because I can see that color is slightly more warmer than the blue purple part. And I'm going to, I didn't paint in that little fold over there that I can see on the top while I do the voiceover because I couldn't see it. That was behind the little petals. I'm not going to paint that in, but it would have been nice if I could paint it in, but we'll just paint it like this for now. And maybe next time we'll remember to paint in a fold in a petal like that, just to show you exactly how I do that. If you are beginning, you don't know how to do that, it's quite easy, but I'll do that next time. And then I just use some clean water to lift out some of the color, and my tissue paper just dab on my petal to lift out some of the excess pigment. So always make sure you have some tissue paper handy, 2 glasses of clean water. I just have my 1 glass here because I'm painting in the garden, but it's always better to have 2 glasses of water next to you. Then again, I want to lighten it, so I just use my tissue paper and I just dab up some of the color. And this is the green mix. A very small brush, this is a 0, nice tip, fine point, and I'm just going to draw in those little veins. A lot of dogs barking. Anyway, so I'm just taking it around these little sections. I just want to paint it in, even though I'm not following the exact shape of each vein. And then I use clean water and I just soften those little lines. And I'll go back later and just darken a few little sections to create those little folds in the leaf. And then again, that Payne's Grey or sepia mix with a touch of the blue in. Those are the little darker sections that I'm just using to create those little folds. Again, it might dry much lighter, and then I will just go back and darken it again after I'm finished. I might go back next day and come back and just see if I need to darken it a little bit more, because like I said earlier, watercolors dry much lighter, so you sometimes have to go back and just adjust things the next day. And this little brush I ordered from Art Savings Club. It's a tiny little travel brush. It's so cute, and it literally fits in your purse. You can even pop it in your handbag with some of your pigments or your paints and a watercolor book or a sketchbook, and you can paint anywhere. That are so cute, and obviously for fine detail, if you want to use a bigger brush, you have to take a bigger travel brush with. But I do have those ones that I linked before, so go and have a look. My voice is going away because it is a lovely brush to use if you travel and you don't ruin your fibers of your hairs of your brushes. Sometimes I love to paint on a weekend because you just are a little bit more relaxed. You paint looser. Not that I don't, I love to paint detailed paintings as well, but for my sketchbook, I just like to practice a few little things in my sketchbook and not worry too much about it. Like the watermelon that I painted, just a study again that I like to sometimes paint. And then, if you want to go back later and paint it on a bit more expensive watercolor paper, like Art or Fabriano, you then add more detail. And then what I did this section was I dropped in some of the pigment, and then I just used my tissue paper to lift out some of the excess color so that it's not too dark. I don't want it to be too dark, but I do want it a little bit darker. And that will just push the little bottom petal back and those lighter petals forward. I talk a lot about that with my painting that I did with the Phalaenopsis orchid, the moth orchid. If you haven't seen that tutorial, it is a fun tutorial, and it is on Patreon, the step-by-step tutorial. But I love the way the watercolors, sometimes when you darken the back petals, it just pushes those front petals more forward. And I love to create that look on the paper with watercolors. Again, I'm going to go in and just darken that section, leave it to soak up into the paper. So I want the paint to stain the paper, and then I will go back and just soften it with a little drop of water on my brush. I'm going to go back to this part Again, I don't want to buckle the paper. I also don't want to create blooms. So I will keep an eye on that while I'm busy painting so I don't create a mess. It's a bit wet and you'll notice when I drop in the paint. So it's going to create those little puddles of pigment. Let me just mix a bit more color. I want a bit of a darker green. And while the paper is wet, it will just flow everywhere and create its own little markings. And I'll go back with my brush once I cleaned it off some tissue paper and rinsed it in clean water, and right like I did right now, and then I will just smooth it out a bit just to neaten it up slightly. Now these little veins nearly disappeared, so I might come back tomorrow or the next day and just darken those little veins again and add more detail. But again, it's just for my sketchbook. And you can see now I'm going back and lifting out some of the pigment because there's a water bloom forming and I do not want that, so I just sweep it up and dab it on some tissue paper, trying to lift out some of the yellow because I do want it in certain parts but I don't want it everywhere. And this is how I soak up those little water hard lines that sometimes happens when you leave too much water on your paper. This way I lift it out and I just dab it on my tissue, and I'm keeping an eye on it. If I notice anything I will just lift it out again. Okay, so I have to go and make lunch. I'm going to dry my brushes. I'm going to rinse them first, and then I'm going to take a tissue paper that I have handy here, and I'm just going to dry it flat on my paper. Remember, you do not want your brushes to stand up. I'm also going to dry my palette because it is wet. You do not want to close your palette when all of your colors are wet. Those little parts I still have to fill up with my own colors if I want. Always a doggy's hair on my palette, even though I close it. But these are lovely palettes that you can buy, and you can always fill up with other colors. I filled up other colors, used other colors like Winsor Newton, Core Watercolors, and Mission Magenta Gold colors. So I don't just use my sminky colors in here. This one row on the left is all my sminky colors, and then on the right are all new colors that I added in for myself. So if I travel, I have a full set again of my colors, and this is the color that I used. This is the ruby red, some other lake deep, and you can use some of the connection violet, but I mixed my own with the ruby red and some ultramarine, and that created that beautiful color. So you could also use ivory or sepia for the darker little colors that you want to mix in the purple. You can also use some paint gray. So it's all up to you, whatever you want to do. But as long as you just paint, as long as you make time to paint, and this is my finished little viola painting. And I'm going to dry my brushes, everything, and make sure that I clean all of the paint brushes completely. I didn't use that one, but that was one of my travel brushes. That's quite a big one that I wanted to show you. And these ones, I'm just going to make sure that they are completely dry before I store them away. And preferably you want to keep your plastic holders when you buy your brushes so that you can cover your brushes again and use them for when you travel, so you don't have to put it in your paint tin like I did and bend your fibers of your or the hairs of your brush. I will see you next time with another tutorial.